Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, December 29th, and this is the work session of the Board of Supervisors for the capital improvements plan, or our CIP plan. I guess we'll go over first the capital improvements plan process overview. Navigate over there with all this stuff. I'm getting a wheelie chair though.
That's not fair.
I know. I'm not here for you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm getting thawed out.
Not much all.
I'm good. I don't know if it fit, but I appreciate you.
So as the board is aware, this is a process that the Board of Supervisors in Story County has been doing for several years now. The process begins by the board in late fall approving forms and the entire process and time frame, and then directing staff to reach out to elected officials and department heads with the applications, and then those entities in turn, if they have anything to incorporate, propose to be incorporated into the capital improvements plan, submit those. This year we used our technology as a best friend, and so I hope it was easier. We did online submittals. Once those were received, the CIP review committee met. That is Sandra King, Alyssa Wignall, Barb Steinbeck, Darren Moon, Michael Cox, Joby Brogdon, and myself. And I don't think I've missed anyone. We met, or at least Markley. We met to go over all the projects. What we do is because generally those are the entities that have submitted projects as well. It's an opportunity for them to explain it in a little bit greater detail if we had any questions. So we met earlier in December. The first meeting of the Board of Supervisors work session was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but because of the weather, we delayed it to today. That's the process in a nutshell. I won't go past that. Are there any questions on the process?
No.
Okay, so today we have the draft projects that have been submitted. These are, and on the agenda, it still says preliminary for work session on 12/15/2021. The projects have not changed since that. Everything has been static in that regard. We're looking at beginning, the current year would be fiscal year 2021, and then going out until fiscal year 2020, pardon me, 6. Couldn't do the math that fast. Let me share the screen. So what I have on the screen is basically a colored version of the PDF that was online with the applications hyperlinked for internal use. The yellow is the projects that are in the current condition or current capital improvements plan that have been completed. So through our staff discussions, we identified those items. Can I borrow this?
You bet.
All right, this way I don't have to turn all the way. Thank you, Joey. The green ones are those projects that are in the current adopted capital improvements plan, but which staff has said leave as is. There are no modifications that are required. The orange orange peachy are projects in the current CIP with proposed modifications. So on this color-coded version, you'll see those noted in red. And then internally, you can actually look to the application. That row is hyperlinked. The blue are new applications that were submitted through this process. And then the gray are projects that are in the current CIP that staff would like the board to have some discussion in regards to. Whether they remain in the current CIP, get removed. No changes to the application, just bring it forward for discussion by the board. Are there any questions on the color coding? Okay, so when we get to fiscal year 2021, our current fiscal year, pretty much everything is done, completed.
Fiscal 2022.
So the current year, the language current year is how we denote it in the CIP. So that's why it's important to take a step back. Current year, when the current adopted CIP was put in place, was fiscal year 2021. The CIP runs on a calendar year basis.
It'd be right on your fiscal year.
It's a calendar year and a fiscal year. So if you look at actually the capital improvements plan that was attached to the agenda on page 3, it says current, it's at the bottom of page 3. It says current projects. Those were fiscal year 2021.
Yeah, so when this
So it's
current,
logical that those should all be completed.
so yeah, when the board adopted the current CIP that we're in, we were in fiscal year 21. So that's why those projects are listed as fiscal year, current year is fiscal year 21.
That's just the way it's always been since the initiation of it too.
I thought that we just put some like year adopted.
Yeah, we could.
I'm just thinking because it confuses me because I look at fiscal year and I'm thinking over in fiscal year 22. I
Yeah.
get what you're saying, and
Yeah.
it was adopted in fiscal year 21 or fiscal year 20, whatever.
But we've, in the past, we've had some instances, this is the first year I can recall that we've not had this happen, where we had a project and at the time the CIP was adopted, it was in that fiscal year, and it still wasn't done by this time, as we're looking ahead to the next CIP. So we had to amend the date or move it. And I think you asked, Latifa, why we're a calendar year for CIP. It just was a matter of timing of when we originally set up the adoption. When we first set up a capital improvements plan in Story County, it went in line with the budget. And so we're trying to play catch up because we were identifying things that were already in the pipeline that we had never had in a capital improvements plan.
Oh, okay.
So that's why that's a calendar year. Yeah.
Can we change it? I mean, are we far enough in that we could?
No, I
kind
think
of-
we could. It just would take some tweaking of language. Yeah, I mean, it operates on a fiscal year.
Uh-huh.
And it's adopted at the same time as the budget.
People are confused enough with
Mhm.
calendar years and fiscal
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
We
it is,
Streamline that
it's-
and clarify that. I think that would be good.
it is confusing.
Especially for those of us that are working with it too.
Yeah.
trying to- Oh, yeah, we're calendar year on this one, not fiscal year.
Right, and I get why it happened. Is that if we can
We can
run a
wrap
place
it.
now where we can just kind of shift it enough. That would, I don't know.
So that does pull us then into, okay, no, I don't need this. I just couldn't see the colors.
Okay.
Thank you. Into fiscal year 2022. In the past, we've done it a couple ways. I've just shared this on the screen and we've gone project by project. How would the board like to do it? Obviously, those are noted as completed. We don't have to discuss.
You'd be starting with the green.
Yep.
First green one. Leonard, go project by project.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
just do it.
okay, that sounds fine.
Okay, the first, might make this a little bit larger. I do need to see who's all on, though, too.
When you last had it up, there was just one. But it wouldn't hurt to see if we have anybody that from some of these other departments or offices.
So I think Mike might be on. Mike, are you on the phone? Or Ryan?
Yeah, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you. We were just seeing who from staff was also on.
Yep.
So this first one is from the auditor's office. Again, it's in green, so there are no changes from the current adopted CIP, but this is the purchase of election equipment.
And it is fiscal year 2022 that's in the budget.
Correct.
So that fiscal year column does mean fiscal year.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Conservation, the next three really are not large changes to the project itself. They are changes to the funding source. As the board knows, these three have been part of the ARPA discussion. So these have the funding source column in the draft CIP would recognize that as ARPA.
And where was the lake restoration? It looks like the fiscal year has changed.
Yes. Mike, do you want to jump in?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
The Mcfarland Park Restoration Project is in fiscal year 2022 right now. Where was it booked in the previous CIP?
Good question.
I believe.
It was fiscal year 2021. So it's been pushed, it is one of those that was pushed up to 2022.
Okay, so it's, okay.
Page 8 of the current CIP.
Page 8. Yep. So that portion is design. That portion is design, and that will be completed this fiscal.
But originally it was, and the original plan was going to be done last year. It just didn't get there.
Thank Galloway done.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
The next three are facilities management, so no changes.
Now there is one, the group home flooring replacement for the Duluth site is now complete.
Oh,
So,
matter of a couple weeks.
yes,
Okay. Next one, Joby, do you want to just tackle these next three?
yeah, the two of them are the HVAC project of Justice Center. They were funding source changed. They were moved to the ARPA funds along with the front counter, permanent front counter barriers here at the administration building, animal control and the engineers building. They were just a funding source change. Yeah, unless there's questions.
Tackle anyone?
What's that? Do
The new one,
the new one, yeah, and then potential HSC, HVAC equipment replacement is a proposed, it's an application I submitted for ARPA, potential ARPA funding, so.
So it's the
That
same application essentially.
And I put fiscal year 2023 for that one, if approved.
The HSC HVAC,
Yes,
it's 2022.
should be 2023, I guess.
Okay.
I corrected it on my own, I'm sorry. Sheet I'm looking at. So.
Any additional questions for Joby? The next three are secondary roads. And they're already in there, no changes. And then the last one is Storycon. And Lisa noted that while portions might be completed, it's not completed according to the billings that she's received from Iowa State. And then the amount was revised accordingly too.
Say that again. Not completed according to billings for last year.
Yeah. The total that we've been billed out for the project's not, we haven't paid out everything. In short, yeah.
We know. Okay,
I don't think
but
so.
we expect to be done paying for that
We should be.
in
soon.
FY 22.
So actually, by the time this gets to being set before the board for approval, this will probably say completed or something thereabouts. So that is it for fiscal year 2022.
And so you would move Joby's HCS facilities management down to this year 2023.
Correct.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, first one is Mcfarland Park Lake Restoration. This is the actual construction. And there was a revised amount from what's in the current CIP. It's $1.2 million now.
What was it?
That 1.2 is based on engineers' estimates through the design contract that we are undergoing at the moment.
500, it was 500,000 is what we had in the current, we have in the current
It's
CIP.
500,000 and we're now at 1.2 million.
Yes. Can you explain why the difference between 500,000 and 1.2 million?
Sure, that 500,000 was before we got into construction engineering. And now that we have a contract for engineering services for design, that's this 1.2 is the current opinion of costs.
What did Hickory cost?
Hickory? Oh, golly, I'm just gonna give you an kind of an order of magnitude, but I think it was 3.8 or 3.6, somewhere in there.
And what's the comparative size of the lakes?
Oh, you know, Hickory's 100 acre, just shy of 100 acres, and this one is about 7 acres.
Say under 10. So that this should be a third of what Hickory costs? I mean, I know it's not just per acre, but it seems kind of high.
Well, yeah, I'm just pulling it straight off of the engineer's opinion of costs for construction. And so I think it was 1.19 or something like that, and so I just put in it at 1.2. So it's hard to compare those different projects. They're the two different lakes. They are very unique. This one has some outlet work, just like Hickory Grove did, but that's fairly typical. This one we have dredge and spread. This one we have some significant work of the sediment forebay that we really didn't do at Hickory, or didn't do to that extent, I should say. So it's kind of apples and oranges, but we've worked with this engineering firm on a number of projects, and you know, they've been really been very close with their construction estimates. So I don't really have any reason to doubt that number at this time.
So the 500,000 that was originally budgeted was just a placeholder then?
I'd say, you know, that, yeah, it's a matter of semantics, what you want to call it. We extrapolated that from with kind of the rationale that Hickory was using, thinking, well, if Hickory cost us this, we're going to estimate that Mcfarland will cost us this amount. But there was no engineering behind that 500,000.
Okay, because that's, wow, that's quite a jump. And the engineering estimates are coming from the work that's being done right now, right?
For design, correct. So we contracted for design engineering, and so we're nearing the end of that design stage on the, and so this is the current cost opinion.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yep.
The next one for discussion is the Skunk River Greenbelt acquisition. The south is the title of it. That amount is a revised budget amount from 350,000 down to 343,000. What you have.
Mhm.
And then Mike, do you want to talk about the next 5, which are your new ones?
Yeah, would you like me to go one by one, or how would you like me to handle that?
One by one, please.
One by one? Okay, the first one is for Conservation Center expansion planning, $50,000. This is a request that the Conservation Board approved in their FY23 budget request. I think you all know that Conservation Center is overcrowded, if you will, for workspace, et cetera, and for public space. So this is really looking at an effort to identify what we want to, how we want to use the facility. It's a precursor to a design contract. So this is how we want to use the facility. Do we want to use it? Do we want to have exhibit space? Do we, how many staff should we plan for? How many classrooms do we put in the building? How are we going to use it with the site here? So that's what this is for. And then we would go into, theoretically, then we would move into a request a design stage phase next year.
So, can you help me, can you just help me understand the whole, I'm sorry, Mike, help me understand the whole process. So there's a pre-design phase before the design phase.
That's what we're anticipating this is, correct. Correct, because we just simply don't know from a programmatic basis right now what we need to be designing for.
And so do you have?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. Do you have consultants in mind that say, oh, well, this pre-design will be $50,000?
Not at the moment.
So are you wondering
Where the 50,000?
how they came up with
It
50,000?
seems like a lot when we're talking about designing
Pre-design.
a pre-design and then a
Yeah,
design. for another.
it may be high. It may be high.
Well, we could look at the fact. Where's the space, our county space needs?
It's in
Current
FY 22.
Yeah, 35,000. That's 35,000 for all our buildings, including the conservation center. And is that
Correct.
what we're gonna nab about? We haven't heard of it. Okay. So maybe that's the thing. You're looking at 35,000 versus 50,000.
That could be, it could be, at this point, it's just an estimate. We're doing a much smaller scale analysis with a neighboring property right now that we're under contract for. And so they're going to develop kind of a master plan for that property, and that's at, I believe we ended up at 15,000 for that, so it's going to be north of that, more than that, but yeah, I agree. I think 50's on the very high end.
I guess I have just kind of a question on the whole concept as well, the pre-planning, Mike. So I think you need to help me with this a little bit. So if I heard you correctly, it's just trying to figure out what you want to do. If you want more class, or if you want to do more class sizes or more staff, or so is this like a facilitated discussion? I'm trying to figure out how that differs from maybe your discussions that your board has or you have with your board to kind of identify the direction that you'd like to. How is this differing from that?
No, I think that's very close, Lisa. This would be having a facilitator come in and guide the board through maybe a couple work sessions on developing what we want to do from a programmatic level from our office here at Mcfarland.
How does that differ from your strategic plan? Isn't a lot of that already in your strategic plan?
Strategic plan, I guess, looks at a higher level. And this is identified actually in the strategic plan to look at the how we want to use Mcfarland. So strategic plan is a higher level. We know we want to protect our natural resources. We know we want to be doing environmental education. Those are some things, and some broad basic or broad scale goals for the different units in the strategic plan. That it does identify some specifics. One of those specifics in the strategic plan is to do some analysis of what's offered at and what we want to offer at Mcfarland. So in my mind, we couldn't enter into a design stage right now because we just purely don't know what we're designing for. Do we want to, how many classrooms do we want to put in? Do we want to put museum space or interpretive space in? How is the building going to be used? We can't answer that yet. So this process would help us answer those questions. And yeah, we could, like you say, bring that cost estimate down.
Maybe I need to be more clear about what we're doing here right now. What we're doing, walking through the CIP is just identifying all the projects that people are hoping or planning to bring forward. By going through this, we're not, if we move on, say, to the next fiscal year, keep working our way through, we're not saying, oh, okay, all these projects we're going to say yes to when it comes to budget time.
No.
Like I think that's the part that's making me a little nervous is I don't want to be committing us to anything without fully understanding everything. And I just don't want to end up at budget time a year down the road asking all these questions and saying, wait, I'm not comfortable with that, and then have a department like, but it's been in the CIP for a year, and so basically we just expected it was going to happen. So can you help me understand what we're doing?
I think you just said it.
Pretty much,
Well, go ahead.
pretty much right now, we're just looking at previous projects that are completed, that have been on the CIP. B, right now, since we're looking at FY '23, which we're going into budget work sessions for fiscal year '23, we're just looking at what is either new that was submitted this year as a project that is going to be in somebody's department or office's budget request, and then things that have been on the CIP that just, it's their time to show up in the current fiscal year. But right now, we're not making any decisions that, yes, these are projects that are going to happen.
Okay, because I don't want to spend a lot of time picking anything apart, and certainly Mike, if you're not like prepared to get into like the whole nitty gritty of it, that's what we're supposed to do on budget work sessions. I'm good with that.
Well, I think this is your opportunity to start getting the questions out there too.
Okay.
So that department heads and elected officials are ready for budget work sessions too. So the capital improvements plan is just that, it's a planning document. And it helps then the board, staff, the public see where the big picture is, or where capital funding or capital spending is going to, has happened and will may be happening in Story County. So it lets you as a board of supervisors, when you're making budget decisions, have a tool in your toolbox to prioritize limited resources. And so, yeah, this is a time to ask those tough questions of elected officials and department heads too, because what may be identified by one as a necessity, there may be a greater need for the greater good of Story County. And I don't just mean county government, but Story County in another area, and those resources are finite. So again, keep in mind, it's a tool in your toolbox that you use, and it's the appropriate time to ask the questions. Where it gets really kind of, I hear your concern. When we're talking years 24 and on, there may be an expectation. Well, it has been in CIP for years. But again, it's just a plan. And until you start discussing that budget and start approving the budget, there should not be a reliance that the project's going to occur.
And I'm going to add something on to this. It is not the board's plan. Board of Supervisors did not put together this document. So when somebody says, well, the board saw it so that we just been anticipating it. No, people should not anticipate that they're going to get those things in the subsequent year budget. These are brought to us. It's not our plan. Because we're not saying take a line out or anything like that. We never have. Feedback, I think, is good. And I do have feedback on this one, just that if the deputy land, you're looking at 15,000 for pre-planning there, and for countywide survey, we've got 35,000. I think 50,000 for pre-planning for what's now in one building is awfully high. And I also, and this is one person talking, so I'm just going to say it, You say you don't know what you want. I think you know what you want. You're the person who lives with the conservation department. You and your staff live with your services and your programs all the time. I think you have an idea about how many staff you might be requesting, you know, how many classes you might be running. I don't think a consultant's going to tell you that. That's just my thoughts on this. I think the pre-planning is more appropriately, can be done by staff and doesn't have to be real fancy. That's all. I can see better uses for the money.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, so I might be thinking of our other documents. But is this also something too that we post and have the public then provide input on as well? So they have kind of a general idea of what, if you said, overall picture of what we're looking at, and then they can provide feedback to you of saying, why are you doing this, or.
Right. Yeah, the board will discuss this again at your first work session for the budget work sessions. And then at the end of all the budget work sessions, I compile it back into a draft document, then bring it to the board for review, and then that is what's put out for public review.
Thank you for the process. Do we have more
Again,
questions?
from a department head standpoint, I'll just say in reference to the discussion about whose document this is. I mean, I think that we do ask for consideration from the supervisors, and so I think this is a Board of Supervisors document. But with that, it doesn't necessarily, and anyone can correct me here if I'm wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to get funded. I think that it means that probably the current year projects, when the document gets approved, they should be represented at a funding level, or probably not in the CIP in that current year. But otherwise, I guess I would offer that I think this is a supervisor's document that's important for planning at the department level.
Any more questions on the conservation?
Well, if it's a supervisor's document, that means that we would be making changes on it. We could be making changes on it.
Yeah, I mean, the board in the past has changed the funding sources.
At this time, or what would it be?
Well, this is a work session, really, just to go through the projects. So you have an understanding of what was submitted. But if you,
Then what happens?
then we work through the budget work session. And so those would be specific for 23. But when I come back to you with a draft later in January, that's an opportunity again to make changes. And then
At a board meeting.
at a board meeting. But I think also to keep the dialogue going with department heads and elected officials too, if there's just something that's really concerning that's been submitted, this is also an appropriate time to bring that up, so that I have an opportunity then to, if that elected official department head is not available today, or I can reach out to them and let them know so that they have some opportunity to provide additional input or whatever information the board may need. I'm trying to remember, I think there have been a couple of projects that have just been outright removed.
There has been some moved, they've been pushed back. We've pulled them forward as well, as at times when the need has become more apparent, so it's been moved forward. If that's a project, but yeah, we removed some last year, I do believe. We cleaned some up because we had a lot we had some that just kind of floated. They just every year seemed to get just pushed back, and we ultimately removed them. changed them, because sometimes, you know, the project changes as it gets closer.
So I think what I'm hearing on this particular topic one is thinking that the estimated amount is a high estimate. And that be reduced, whether that's discussed here or at our January meeting. Either might come back with a different number or us through our discussions, looking at what we see as more of an appropriate or potential appropriate number for that estimate to be at.
And this is one that you'll be discussing too through your budget work sessions because it's in the proposed 23 budget.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So I think this is good feedback and I appreciate that. So this has given me some things to take back and come better prepared for that discussion.
Yeah, I think
Great.
Mike makes a really good point, and it kind of goes off what Leanne said earlier, because as we've seen, there's not a lot of other departments or offices that are here today. So if, as we go through these, if you've got specific questions, then Leanne can reach out to that elected official or department head and say, hey, anticipate having we had some questions about this, they need some clarification on that. So that's really good information for us to have, because, you know, so a lot of these projects, you know, we know a little bit about them, but it's more so that actual office or department who submitted it that's going to really know how to answer some of those questions. But yeah, so that's why I think going through them one at a time really helps, because when we have these questions, then we can get them to the appropriate person to be prepared to answer.
Also, Mike, I think you're selling yourself and your staff and your board a little bit short in thinking you need to get external information to help you identify your needs. I think an architect can help in terms of how do you best meet your needs. But I think you're the one that's going to be identifying how many offices you need, your current staff, and what you think you're going to be asking for, you know, a meeting in the future, and also the classrooms. I think you've got the expertise there. You've got the information, you know, in the minds of your staff and your board members. So I just kind of question why it's not an internal planning process.
Sure, understood.
Ready to go on to the next one, which is Bacon Lake Cabin.
Yeah, so the next one, Dakin's Lake Cabin, this is a project that was funded in a previous fiscal. After going through the design process, ended up with and some of you may probably remember this, but ended up with a product that in the 11th hour of design, all of a sudden went to a scope that, or from a financial standpoint, that was not supported, budgeted for, and so we really drew back from that. So this is scaling that building down significantly, but moving forward with construction of one up there at Dakin's Lake and using conservation reserve funding for that. We still hear that the community wants one there. We'd still like to do one there. Questions will always come up about you know, the location, Dakin's versus Hickory, for a first cabin, and you know, I know different people weigh in on that at different sides. So, but at any rate, this is approved by the approved by the Conservation Board and recommended to move forward into 23 with conservation reserve funding. Any questions on that?
I still think it's pretty high for a cabin.
What was that, Linda?
I still think that's a pretty high price for a cabin. I know it's a large cabin, but it's a cabin.
Yeah, understood. I mean, we have some of our problems, I think, that we found in the previous design stage were, one, by code, we're required to have fire sprinkler systems, which means we have to do work to the water supply system. Number two, we discovered that we had to do some significant amount of work to be able to connect to the wastewater line. So a lot of these added costs were utility and infrastructure costs that are high. And so frankly, we're looking at it now that, we know we have to meet code requirements with fire sprinklers. But how can we get that cost figure down? And so we're looking at a prefab building. Prefab estimates are probably in the neighborhood of 150,000 for the kind of building that we're looking at. That does have some added amenities of sustainable design to it, i.e. 6-inch framed walls, so more insulation, etc. So things like that, higher grade windows, etc. Heat pump system versus a traditional HVAC system. So those are some added things that would go into a kind of a base prefab building that would be constructed or moved onto site. But we still have to answer some of those fire sprinkler questions and wastewater questions. So that's why we landed on 300,000 for it. That may well be a little bit on the high side too, but the cost opinion for the last one, the one that we did not move forward with, was in the neighborhood of $500,000. That one was to sleep 10 to 12 people. This one, we're anticipating now scaling that down to 6 to 8 people. Any other questions on it?
Webster County did. Can I send you some information on Webster County? They did tiny cabins, tiny homes.
Yeah.
Fort Dodge Prison prefabbed them, and they were like or something.
Right. Well, there's different schools of thought on that. Clearly they appeal to different levels, different audiences. We know that our audiences up there, Ziering has no lodging per se, and our audiences up there want larger facilities that can take small groups, whether it be small business group, small family group, whatever it may be. And those tiny homes are attractive to some sectors of our community, but fairly limited sectors. So we don't think that those tiny homes will meet the needs that we're hearing coming from Dakin's Lake.
So you're envisioning the cabin being kind of like almost used like a community center, sort of by folks?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's clearly for overnight lodging. I don't know that we would get into renting it out otherwise.
Okay.
But they do have a community center there in Ziering for those types of functions.
You're thinking more of family retreat, related individuals, groups, or something like that.
Correct.
And I guess that's probably one of my problems with this, is you're relying on, you're putting something together that can sleep 8 or 8 people. You're limiting, as opposed to having a few smaller cabins, which would be more flexible. You're just putting that this one large cabin that has some limited usage. I don't know. And isn't cheap, so.
Well, you know, when we cut to the work session, I'll bring my statistics on this, but we had done some extensive look at return on investment for cabins and cabin uses, and found that the larger the cabin, the quicker the return, the higher the demand on usage. We know that we can't do large, and we know that, you know, we obviously have the question about a large facility, the 10 to 12 plus, some cabins are larger than that, 14. We obviously have a question about putting such a facility like that in this location. And so this is what we're asking for here is not that, it is scale that down to what we think is a respectable, responsible size for this location, for this community, for this park. And still get us a good return on investment that should pan out in the 7-year range, is when we should see a return on it.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to bring that, Mike. I think that,
Sure.
thank you.
Next is the Heart of Iowa Nature Trail.
So this one is what we refer to as Phase 3A on this project for $674,000. This has been is all through grant funding, with the exception of $40,000 that came from the Energy Transfer Fund. We're anticipating entering a design contract in FY23 for this money, or for this project. And this is the project, this is, I guess, the paving, the improvement extension from the Skunk River Bridge at Cambridge to, let's see, 610th Avenue, which is a gravel road 1 mile west of S14. So that's the extent of the project. It's funded by SRPTA and by state recreational trails grants, in addition to the $40,000 ETF money.
So out of that 674, you're just saying you would be seeking 40,000 of ETF funding?
Correct. The rest is all outside money.
And this is just the design phase?
No, this is construction.
Oh, okay.
And how many miles? 1 point something?
Oh, golly, good question. I should know that.
Couldn't find it
No,
now.
I believe it's a little more than 1.
I have a map from it.
Bear with me just a moment here.
So these are showing, Leanne, just
This is
It's like about 2 miles on the map, or a little more.
about 2 miles.
I just found it on the map in here.
so when we
It's about 2 miles.
when we have the column estimated budget amount, that includes all
Total
funding.
budget,
So
right.
not just our funding, but also includes outside grants,
Yes.
everything.
All the sources and.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's about 300,000 a mile.
Yeah, my computer's not cooperating today, but yeah, I've got roughly 10 10,000 feet, so just a little over 2 miles.
Good work on getting all those funds.
Yeah. Next is the Silver.
I mean, clearly, we're seeing a lot of community interest, and, you know, statewide interest in developing this trail network here in Story County. And so, we've been able to capitalize on that interest because we know that, you know, we've had a little bit of money to put in, for seed money in some of these projects in the trail projects over the years. And we've just been able to turn that over several times, if you will, leverage that for outside funding. And it's recognized that, that these are important projects here for Central Iowa. So we're pleased that, boy, if we could do all of our projects like that, that'd be fantastic. So all of that would be donated money going into that Phase 3A project.
Mike, do you want to
Any
go
other
on?
questions about that?
Thank you.
Yep. Ready for the next one?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Soper's Mill access improvements. This is the second phase of a two-phase project there. The current phase we're in right now, and we were awarded grant funding for that, for the Phase 1. This is the Phase 2, which would be construction. Phase 1 was design and some access improvements at Soper's Mill. Phase 2 would be construction of the launch area improvements, parking lot and launches itself. And so we have we've got a construction estimate from our Phase 1 contract that puts it at about $100,000 to make that improvement. So that's what is represented in that you will see in the FY23 Conservation Board request. And we're anticipating a significant level of grant funding for that as well. So we're thinking that we can get in the neighborhood of $80,000 of that through grant sources. The other, the 80 of the 100, and at the moment, the other source of that would be Energy Transfer Fund as well, which is the same as, it's in the general fund. So, so our match money would be ETF money also.
So how would your grant timeline on a project like that and our budget timelines fit together? Because you've got 100,000, then you say there's a possible grant. If we got the grant, we'd probably need 20,000 of general fund or ETF to match it. So what will you come and ask us for? You understand my question?
Well, yeah, I think I understand. So I'm going to ask for the this 100,000 in the FY23 budget. And at that time, I'm going to show, Allie, I should have that budget in front of me, but I'm going to show grant funding for the lion's share of that, and then the balance would be a general fund. But having said that, the general fund portion would come from ETF. Does that answer your question, or?
I think so, yes. I mean, you don't have the grant, but you'll be saying, I'm probably going to get the grant, so that's what my budget's going to reflect, is grant funds and match from the ETF funds.
Correct. And, you know, there's no guarantee on the grant, but we've worked with these grant administrators for years, and we know that just like the Heart of Iowa that they want to see completed, they want to see these water trail improvements done. And so again, I've got a fairly high level of confidence that we will get grant funding for that project. Maybe not at the $80,000 level. I still have a pretty good feeling on that, but we'll get a significant amount from the grant, I feel.
So
I'm hopeful.
Next question is just from lack of experience, but, so if you approve the 100,000, you get the grant for 80,000. What happens to that 80,000 that was approved? Does that get absorbed into other projects in that budget?
We said he's not going to
No,
fund for the 100,000.
no. So I'm saying the total project will be 100, but I'm also going to show an $80,000 income in the revenue budget. Does that make sense, Latifa? So our total project, our total out of pocket, or I should say outgoing, would be 100, but we're going to get 80 of that in. So the difference there would be the 20, and again, we're speaking in round numbers here, but and that would be from the Energy Transfer Fund, which was a donation to the county a number of years ago.
Thanks, Mike.
Does that make sense? So essentially, there's no tax asking on this project.
Yes, that makes sense.
So if for some chance if for some chance the grant doesn't get funded, then we have another decision point there, and that is, do we try to find other funding sources? Obviously, we don't do a project like that without funding sources, and so I'm not going to bring a project forward that says let's spend 100,000 of tax asking for this project. That's just not realistic. That's not going to come from us. If we don't get that grant fund, probably what we'll do is just keep fundraising for the project and move the project timeline down until we get the grant funding for it.
Thank you.
But again, I remain optimistic about the FY23 granting.
So then, Linear, the part of Iowa Nature Trail potential funding sources specifically lists Energy Transfer Fund and
Yeah.
grants.
I'll change,
Okay.
yeah, and this one, Mike, on this one, we had listed general fund and grants. I'm gonna remove
Yep,
general fund and just put ETF and grants.
that's fine. And I don't know if we have any consistency on that, Leanne. We should probably, because in specifically the ETF is located within the general fund. So I know that Lisa always likes to see it just called general fund, but because that's where it's coming from ultimately. But I'm flexible on that. But the end of the story is that yes, that is Energy Transfer Fund money there, not tax asking.
I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think it's a subset or whatever of the general fund, so I think that's how Lisa probably has it. So she'd probably like to see that it's the Energy Transfer Fund, so she knows. I don't want to speak
Yeah.
for her.
Mike, why don't you go,
Sure.
if you have a chance to, before the work session of the Board of Supervisors on the budget on
Yep.
this matter, can you send me all your projects? You can even just take this spreadsheet and handwrite if it's an ETF as a component or not. Just let me know which ones have ETF.
Sure.
And I might just, I'll highlight I'll make sure that those are identifiable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have the Hickory Grove.
Okay.
Park one.
Yeah, so this one is, You know, it's gonna be real similar to our discussion about the Mcfarland Conservation Center planning. We know we've been waiting for some time now for certain dominoes to fall before we do some more development at Hickory Grove Park. When those dominoes do fall, and we're able to consider that new development, i.e. Future cabins, i.e. Campgrounds, where are we going to place those? And if we're going to do cabins, how many, et cetera. So this is really kind of a master planning effort for the park for, say, the next 20 years, where we want facilities and to what level. So that's what this is representing. And again, you know, similar discussion on the amount. That amount might be a little bit high. I have not reached out and got any quotes on that. But before so assuming, and to I guess go into the weeds here a little bit, the domino that I'm referencing is the wastewater project. Once that is complete, then we're going to be able to consider whether or not we want to do cabins and campgrounds there. It is in the Conservation Board's plan to move forward with both of those there. And this, again, is just a precursor to help us define kind of the extents of that, where we want to put those cabins, how many, where we want to put a campground, and you know, not into maybe the details on we want 33 sites versus 30 sites, those kinds of things, but do we want full hookups? Do we want order of magnitude on size? Do we want another storm shelter at some point, etc.? So this is more that master planning level for the park. Any questions on that?
No questions. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
All right. Next one up is the administration building generator capacity increase. This is one that is it's been pushed back a couple of times because it's based off of getting a FEMA grant. This will be the fourth FEMA application I've done for this. So we had to revise. We started this 2 years ago, so we needed to revise the cost of the generator because the price for everything has gone up. So the new price is $712,741. It was previously $634,000. But the newest FEMA application, grant application I filled out, has a better match than the previous one. So the previous general fund request would have been $200,580 with a FEMA match of $433,420. With the new cost estimates and the new application, it's $189,000 general fund ask with the $522,936 FEMA match. So the price of the project went up, but if the grant comes through, it's less money, less taxpayer dollars that would go towards it. Hopefully, hoping by budget work session time, I have an answer on whether or not that FEMA grant will be coming through. If not, we can do like we've done before and just leave it there and do nothing with the project until we have an answer. So move to the next, unless there's specific questions on that one. Next one was paving the rest of the parking and drive area at the animal shelter, the south drive, and then the west of the building where the large animals building sits. We have to increase the cost of the project. It was previously estimated at 33,000. We got a new estimate from Manats about a month ago, and that's reflected in this. Next one, unless somebody's got questions. Recoating of the jail showers, the walls and the floors. We got currently have the epoxy coating on the floors, but nothing on the walls, and we fight mold and mildew buildup. So we adjusted the price. It's now at 58,300. It originally was 80,000. So that come down significantly, and that's got a lot to do with there's more contractors that do that specific type of coating. It's basically the same thing we did in the dog kennels room at the animal shelter this last year. So before it was companies out of Wisconsin or Minnesota that had to come. Now there's local ones that do it. So
And when it says modification of existing project.
that's the price.
Oh,
Change the
Yeah,
price.
Okay.
changing the price. Yeah.
Well, plus, like 2 years ago, there were some changes to the overall project too.
Mhm.
So it went from a new project to modification of existing because it was
Oh.
already a project in the CIP.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we kind of, we broke it out. It was, you'll see it later on. There's the same thing, but it's for the kitchen. They
Okay.
originally were one big project, and then working with John at the jail, we kind of took some priority which needed it and kind of broke them apart, and separated them so that hopefully see some forward movement on them so that. Next ones are still me if we
Yeah.
move on to the,
Mhm.
these next three are basically things that hinge on this space needs assessment. Because some may not even be needed. Some may be split out. So at this point, the costs are probably inaccurate. The fiscal year that they may get done is inaccurate, because we're not in a position to even try to request something for fiscal year 23 because we just don't know enough. We haven't got that final report from the space assessment. So don't know what the appropriate thing to do with them, because there's multiple things that are up in the air. I don't want to remove them completely. So I don't know if the best course is to just push them back in the CIP.
Like move them to 2024.
Yeah.
And then for the amounts, I would suggest putting a TBD.
Mhm.
I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
Because
Because these amounts were based on some very specific.
very
kind of
specific,
things, and we don't know what the
yeah.
spacing study is gonna bring out,
Mhm.
so
exactly. And
I like that idea. Maybe too.
So do you want all three fiscal year 2024?
I think for now, and then we can adjust accordingly when we do the CIP next year, because then we'll have some more, because like I said, I anticipate there'll be the project name will probably change on them and lots of things. So I think just moving all three to 24 and put TBD with for the cost, and then once we have that final,
Is it
plan.
possible that after we get the space needs study, if we find some things, we say, yay, this is really good, something we want to move on, that we should possibly have some design money in 2023? Because it would be, I could see putting the just construction TBD on 2024, but I'm thinking we might want to do some design work in 23. I don't know how to put a number on it, but is there a
Well-
placeholder we could put in there, or, I mean, what's the process to amend the CIP, Leanne?
Just direct staff to come forward with a,
Any
Amendment.
old time we need it?
yeah.
Okay.
We
well
have
then
not done that, but we could do it.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing, you know, you can plan, but you've got, you know,
Right.
we've got something there that we may find some things that we want to get started on right away. We might want some money in 23 to design, but if we could go back into the CIP, we can direct staff to prepare an amendment and do that. How long would it take to?
That would not be long. The bigger piece of the puzzle would be amending the budget.
which I suppose we can easily put an application together, to put it on the CIP as a design for, we'll figure out a way what we should name it. And then I suppose in the facilities management budget work session, we can talk about whether or not we add dollars to my budget request.
It's a way we can move forward from the space needs study instead of just letting it sit.
Joby and I can work on the language, but it could just be design related to countywide space needs study.
Just simply
Yeah,
that.
sure, yeah, why
And
not?
then I'll just add a note to where we talk about that. Because then that'll give me some time to kind of have a number to go along with that we can talk about budget.
When do you expect to get the final study?
First part of January, which is unfortunately right around the time we start
Yeah.
budget work sessions.
Because I was thinking if we could look at it quickly and say, here's some things we might want to design or work on design in 23 that we could get it into the budget, but
I think given enough of what we all know of some of the more critical things that we're going to need addressed, I can look at those and come up with a pretty accurate estimate on what design fees would be for those projects that we know are probably going to be the red flag projects that come out of the space needs assessment, so that we have some money budgeted for it, you know.
That would be ideal.
yeah.
Since we know,
Yeah,
You
because
know,
a couple of
because
those, we've talked, they kind of been talked about for a couple of years now, and I've already got some, design costs, figures that just need updated because they're a couple of years old, so I think we can have something close enough for budgeting purposes. I was hoping to have that final report a little earlier, but, things came up and we got delayed, so.
Yeah, but that'd still be useful. You can,
Yeah,
you have a good idea where we might be going to.
yeah,
I appreciate that.
that priority's kind of gonna start at, so.
Any other questions for Joby for now?
Okay.
The next two are information technology. The first one is the PIP program for environmental health. And then the second one is courtroom updates for the county attorney's office. Any questions on either of those? Those are pre.
The application.
that's what we just talked about.
Mhm.
The other one.
Continue with the next one, when they did the presentation, we had some additional questions that they were going to prepare during, I was thinking during the budget time of CIP to answer those particular questions.
I know Barb has been getting some quotes, and I know she's out of the office right now. But she has been getting quotes, and then those will be presented through her work session.
Courtroom updates, 37,000 in audio visual effects. More about that.
I know a little bit. It originated from county attorney's office request of IT to courtrooms 1A and 1B to put monitors and update the sound system, real similar to the state did it in courtroom 2A. So it's for evidence presentation and just kind of modernizing the technology that's in the courtrooms. So,
Did they get some pricing information from the state on what that cost them?
yep, that's what Barb did. She reached out to the company that did courtroom 2A to get her pricing, so.
37, that's for 2 courtrooms? Wow.
That's right. The next one is next two are no changes from this, Darren. The next one is revised amounts from the sheriff's office for the mobile computer with accessories, and this includes installation. Yeah, I did not, what was it,
It was
163.5?
163.5.
And this reflects, of course, updated pricing. And they did reach out to Lisa. It was not in the original budget request, but I think all these have now been added, or they've worked with Lisa. The sheriff's office has. So those are the requests for 2023, unless there are any questions. $2024. Mike, I'll turn it over to you, but I'm going to just do some quick, just what the revisions are. So you don't really have to go over in great detail. The first one for Hannum's Mill was actually a 2023 project that's moved to 2024. The same is true for Oriole Ridge Lodge restroom. It was 23, now it's going to 24. No changes to the next one. For the shelter gathering area at West Peterson Park, from 23 to 24. The next one, Mike, I'll let you talk about this here in a minute, but it's both the revised urine amount. It was in 2022 for 500,000. It's proposed to increase to $1 million and be moved to 2024. I need to say that again.
Oh, so it's doubled,
Yes,
and it was originally in 2022.
right. And then the next one, the Hickory Grove Park Road resurfacing, was 340,000, and it's gone down and to 260,000. And again, this is in the current plan for 23. It's proposed to be in 24. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Sure. Any questions on what Leanne said?
Going up to the shelf improvements, the parking lot and the restrooms, what came of the discussions with the city?
So the city manager has expressed that they may be interested in moving forward with some cooperative funding on this. That hasn't come up for consideration at the council level yet. The city is moving forward with a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and we'll be having discussions with the city on including this in that bicycle and pedestrian plan. As far as I know, they have not contracted for that work yet, but I believe their intent is to be contracted for that yet this fiscal. So that's one reason why we wanted to delay it. The second reason is because in more further discussions with the research park, we really don't know where we want to put this yet. There may be some more land that is now becoming available. And so that's just in its infancy. If that land becomes available, I think that would be a preferable location. But again, then I think if the city is going to partner with us, we enter these kinds of decisions together. Particularly if it pertains to how much they want to contribute to the project. So that's why we thought that this, although we wanted to do it earlier, we just think that trying to push it for 23 was premature with the work that's going to be performed now. So the amount is based on a updated cost opinion from our engineer. But again, that amount is very malleable in that if the city wants to partner with this, then let's make sure we have an amount that adequately represents the scope that both parties desire. So that's why all of those reasons are why we moved it from 23 to 24, because we don't have the answers to those questions yet.
Well, you've mentioned some land that might become available. I assume you're not talking about available for purchase by the county.
No, that would not be my understanding. Or I should say, yes, Linda, that is my understanding. It would not be land that we would have to purchase.
Okay. Then the second thing is, I think when we asked you to reach out to the city, and I thank you for doing that, I don't think we were looking at, let's double the price of the project. We're looking at somebody else to help.
No, understood. Understood. And I think, last year, again, I think we had this discussion at the board budget work session last year, but I think we were operating under just shy of a $900,000 project based on the latest cost opinion we had at that time. And we said that we had an available funding source of about $500,000 that's remaining in TIF for this project. Or for TELC. And so that 1 million includes that roughly $500,000 that's still remaining in the TIF project. Does that make sense? So we really haven't doubled the scope of the project. We started from that $900,000 level, asked for a quick revision to the cost opinion on the existing scope. And so that roughly took it up to $1 million project. And so that the scope really hasn't changed. If the city wants to partner and envisions something dramatically different, then I think both parties are just going to have to reconcile that. Whether we all agree on the same scope and find the funding for it mutually, or whether we don't agree on the same scope and the county moves forward with something different than what the city wanted to partner with. So all of that's just speculation at this point. Does that answer your question, Linda?
As much as you probably can right now, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on those that Leanne just went through?
I do not.
No, thank you.
Then moving into, let's see, moving into the blue items there then. Actually, let me just make a note on the green item, Skunk River Flats Addition, 25,000. This was a, real estate contract that the 24 payment is the last payment. So just want to make that note. Let's see, moving into the blue, Deputy Conservation Area, this is for acquisition of roughly 130 acres here next to Mcfarland that Linda mentioned previous in our discussion today. So that's what this is for. That would be the purchase price on it. We anticipate that we'll get some grant funding for that. We'll be submitting a grant for that very soon, here within the matter of the next couple months.
What would you
Questions
think,
on that one?
what would you think the match would be on that grant?
That particular grant's gonna be a max of 200, so we're gonna have to then come up with the balance. I anticipate going to a private fundraising effort for that project, much like we are for some of our other land acquisitions. The Osheim property south of Story City, we're having really good success with the Conservation Partners Project or Partners Group on funding that. So I anticipate the same with this one, that there will be a significant amount of public interest in supporting that financially. So hopefully we're able to get some significant dollars from that. And if we just need to keep pushing this purchase down the road until we get all the money raised, then that's what we'll do. If we can't come up with the 405 and 24, then it goes to 25, et cetera. The land holder at the moment has been a long-standing partner and is very, very good to work with and very flexible, and they assist on fundraising efforts as well. Next, if there's no other questions on that one. Heart of Iowa Trail Improvements Phase 3B. This would be taking the trail from 610th to S14, which would be 620th, so 1 mile. We do have a cost opinion in here, engineer's cost opinion of $428, and we will be submitting grant applications for that. The next one is some Oxbow restoration work, specifically at the Wicks property, which is north of Story City along the Skunk River. So we have a cost opinion of that at $98,000. We're working through design with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service right now on what that entails, and so we're just working through it right now. We don't have any, we're not ready to move forward with that. We haven't identified the funding for it, et cetera. The next one is the Conservation Center expansion design. So part and parcel to our previous discussion on the center progression here, this would be the contracted amount that would go into construction design. And the genesis of that number is generally, when you look at construction design, you look at about 10% of the construction cost. And so that's, you know, we were estimating maybe it's a $2 million facility based on other constructions, and so the $200,000 is where we landed for the cost amount on that one. Again, very tentative. As we get closer to all of these projects, then that's when cost opinions can get firmed up. So any questions on any of those? Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
The next one is Joby's.
Next two are
Next two.
mine, yeah. The Justice Center fire alarm replacement, just moved it from FY 23 to FY 24. It's one that I'm waiting until we kind of know what's gonna happen at the Justice Center, because I will most likely incorporate that project into if there's any kind of remodel or construction project that happens at the Justice Center. So right now, this is just a standalone. If we went in and just replaced the fire alarm system, it would, that's the cost associated with it, but like I said, so I just moving it until we're clear what or if we're gonna do anything with the Justice Center, so. And the next one is a new project. It's the property across the street to the south where the old courthouse annex building sat. It's just grass now. It's got a small community garden on it. I was gonna propose that to pave it to add parking for our pool cars, because we can't put any sizable building on it based off of the setbacks, since it's a corner lot for a structure to sit on it. It's considered to have 2 front yards, so the setback makes for a tiny building, but the parking lot has different setbacks, so.
Not eliminate the garden. Are you talking about paving all of it? Or
Mhm.
just?
It's a new community garden in Nevada.
That's not where the community garden was.
That was just,
No, I know, but they haven't.
I'm asking, I was asking.
Okay.
there is a garden there that has primarily been used by employees.
Right.
It's generally been not kept up. I know that things get planted in it, but it tends to not be cared for, so. But that's, we can talk about that in further detail. It was just,
How many parking spaces could you get out of it?
about 20 additional to the 8 that are there now.
Another IT one.
Yeah, the change, it was actually $85,000. Supposed to go to 95,000. This is the NetApp storage device replacement that I think we have on a 4 to 5 year. Every 4 to 5 years, you see this show up. Again, cost of devices increasing. So that is it for 2024. Going on to 2025, I'll just do some quick comments. You'll see actually conservation, the first line is repeated, the third line down. So that's in there twice.
Oh.
It's the same thing. I'll remove the second instance of it. It's actually a modification of the year going from 2024 to 2025. And then the other ones from conservation are new. All proposed for 2025. And Mike, do you want to see if the board has any questions on those or give summaries?
Sure. So real quickly, Snow Bunting Lodge replacement. This is the lodge on the south side of the lake. Doesn't get a lot of use because frankly, it's in pretty poor condition. This would be replacement of that lodge, in 25. And again, you know, kind of a rough ballpark there of 260,000 based on other building construction projects.
Mike, you skipped the cabin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this would be construction of a cabin at Hickory Grove. This would be the cabin that we designed for Dakin's Lake. Again, a very sustainable cabin and has kind of that top end design and function. So this would be placing that cabin somewhere at Hickory Grove.
What specifically is 50,000 for?
I'm sorry, what was that, Linda?
Specifically, do you get for the 50,000? What is that for?
It's
It's
550.
550.
It's 500.
550?
Yeah.
This is for that cabin that was designed through contract, for the one we were going to put at Dakin's Lake.
This is a
Be
dollar sign.
placing-
Sometimes you-
Yeah.
Like a dollar sign. I thought it was designed. I was gonna say, why are you designing it if you're just replicating
Yeah.
Dakin's, but you're not. You're building the big one.
Correct,
10 to
Yeah.
12 people.
correct, correct. Yeah, you know, design, we'd probably have to revisit design on it a little bit. But, you know, so we probably would have some expenses there in design, but it can all be wrapped into this one line item. Obviously, there'll be new utility connections and infrastructure needs, et cetera, depending on location.
And Mike, I think I heard you correctly. This was the big sustainable one that initially you and the board came forward with for Dakin's and then opted not to do that one at Dakin's.
Yep, you're right, Lisa, that's correct.
Are the infrastructure costs that you were just talking about, are those part of this 550, or do you anticipate that being in addition to this 550?
At this stage of the game, I'm anticipating that is in there. But again, when we start looking this far out without even knowing a location, trying to pinpoint a number is pretty difficult. So the most defensible number we have is the one that came from the cost opinion of the previous designed cabin.
And I would presume that both of these projects really be dependent upon the study that you're doing of what the future.
The master planning?
Master plan.
Yeah, correct. We're hoping that we get the answers from that master planning on validate that this is the size we want, number one, that we want a cabin. I should back up that we want a cabin's there, number one. Number two, this is the size we want. Number three, that this will have the location identified through that master planning. So we can take that effort and then move from there into a pretty, I would hope would be a pretty succinct effort at modifying the plans that were developed for Dakin's Lake. Okay, any other questions on that one? I'm sorry, I skipped that one.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so then we have the Snow Bunting Lodge replacement that I mentioned. The next one is another Oxbow restoration project. This one is at the Osheim project south of Story City, or at the Osheim property south of Story City. We're still in the data gathering efforts stages on that project, on that Oxbow restoration. taking into consideration the site and the hydrology on site and the contract owners' sentiments on it and working through that process. Skunk River Greenbelt Acquisition South. So this is again kind of a multi-phased project. We have been partnering with the Department of Natural Resources on several projects in the floodplain between Ames and the Polk County line on the Skunk River floodplain. And so this is phase 2. Phase 1 of this kind of collaborative effort is referenced in the 23 budget, and that's was the amount for, where did it go? There it is. That's the amount for $343,000 that we discussed in the 23 CIP. The state has, through this effort, if you will, the state has received some significant grant funding for land protection and resource restoration on hundreds of acres. This represents our portion of that project that would put these acres into public ownership. Some of the property is anticipated to be owned by the state, and some of it is anticipated to be owned by us, by the county. All of the funding for resource restoration has been raised by the state, as well as easement payments, or part of the purchase price, if you will, has been raised by the state. So the only thing that would be a local need would be any residual value in the land over. So in other words, the difference between easement, purchase price, and market value. Typically, that's $1,000 an acre. So that's what's represented here. Roughly 175 acres in this project, and so $175,000 for that.
Mike, this is Leanne. Should I delineate those two? The first one from fiscal year 23 being phase 1 and this one being phase 2?
Yeah, that would probably be easier, and I should have done that, Leanne. Thank you. That is the one, it's the fourth one down from the top of that page, Skunk River Greenbelt Acquisition South.
Okay, I will do that.
That's
Thank
what
you.
I'm considering phase 1. That was in the first round of grant funding that's been secured. This next group of properties is in round 2 of grant funding that's been secured.
Which line are you talking about for phase 1, Leanne? On the spreadsheet.
Bear with me while I put my glasses on.
It's in FY23, and it's the one following the Skunk River Flat edition. It's entitled Skunk River Greenbelt Acquisition South.
Line 46, if you're looking,
$343,000.
line 46, if you're looking at the spreadsheet.
I am. Okay, got it.
And you're saying move that to when?
Don't
No,
move it.
phase
I'll
1.
just
We'll just
in
call it
parentheses, phase 1.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So phase 1 and
Just to delineate that these are related projects, but they are not contingent on one another. Okay, then the next one on the list is the Conservation Center expansion construction that we talked about. And that's all we have for conservation on 25. Any questions?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
The last one in fiscal year 25 for discussion is the sheriff's office, and it's actually simply a revised amount, again, given updated estimates. The previous CIP had us at $257,500. So about a little over 20,000 more. I can't do math today, about 20,000 more. Fiscal year 26.
All right. On that one, it's a new roof for the Human Services Center. It's a revised amount, plus it was a revised on the project name, because it originally was Human Services Center new roof and replace the ERV, the fresh air unit that sits on the roof. But I removed that because that would be part of that general HVAC equipment replacement. That's a ARPA funds request. So, and then the budget amount for just the roof is 150,000. Previously, it was 225,000. There is, I obviously missed putting in a new app for third project down, the jail kitchen, place the floor coating and the grease trap. That one's two things. Need the grease trap is no longer in that project. It is in my FY23 budget request to just do the grease trap, but it is the price of that doesn't warrant it to be on the CIP. It's like $5,600. But the project cost needs to be brought down to 66,000 from 115,000, because it's the same thing as the shower coatings. Found a couple of local contractors to give us pricing on that versus out-of-state contractors. So, yeah, significant reduction in cost on this.
Hopefully the amount still goes down, continues to go down.
Yeah,
And then the remaining ones are the leases for the other grader. And that is it. Are there any remaining questions? My next steps are to revise the spreadsheet that you see up here, and we've been referencing with today's discussion. If there's any other offices or departments that I think need to, I don't think we had any questions for any offices or departments, but I'll share the video of today with elected officials and department heads, hopefully as soon as we can get it uploaded and stuff, so they have an opportunity to listen and be prepared. This year, the draft CIP, as I said, I'll present that to the board later in January. I think we're going to take a step back and redesign it and try to make it maybe a little bit more simple. Maybe even reference or look something like just a simple table and spreadsheet. But that's just on our end, things we have to do. Provided I have a computer at that point, which I have now. But are there any other questions for me? Or I think Jovi and Sandra and Mike for all pitching into and helping me answer questions.
Feedback. I found the spreadsheet very helpful. I think it's a lot easier to look at. I did a couple times just today because I didn't have the links before. I didn't see it on the S drive. I didn't go to it anyway. I sometimes wish there was a little more description of the projects on the form.
Yeah, oh, on the application
On the
form?
application, there was not much description. I mean, there wasn't much more than just the project name or a little more. I think maybe a paragraph as opposed to a sentence with some salient facts could be helpful.
Yeah, a little bit more detail would be.
Yeah,
On the actual application.
Yeah.
yes, an
Yeah.
actual
We can
application.
note that for next year, unless you need more for your work sessions as follow-up for today.
I don't know that we necessarily, I don't know that I would necessarily need more for this person, these work sessions coming up. But looking forward, it would,
For future.
yeah.
Well, I'm also thinking if you're putting this out there for the public, isn't this a discussion we had last year about what does I mean, we may know what something is, but the public looks at it
Right.
and USACA land extension phase 2 land survey and associated expenses. You know, I wouldn't know what that was.
So if you'll remember last year, then when we got to actually the public outreach component,
Yeah,
it had a whole different feel to it too. We basically
Yeah.
put them in stories. So this is what we did, this is just a snapshot of one of the ones we did last year. We'll really maximize the most we can with our social media and our website. We'll send to libraries and city halls. Those will be static. They won't be interactive like this, but unfortunately, we didn't gain public feedback last year.
Yeah, but I think
But-
last year we had, you just did that fiscal year
Mhm,
with
yeah.
more detail, and then the subsequent years, you just did like the
Listed out, yep.
spreadsheet or whatever, listed it out.
Yeah, and that's really what got us to thinking this year, let's just simplify the entire document too, and maybe for the current or the upcoming fiscal year, have the summaries in the document like last year. Trying to just get a little bit, so the public can digest it easier and we can as well. 'Cause it does, I mean, I look at it over and over and I'm like, wait, which project is this?
Right. Okay.
well, that makes me feel better, Leanne.
That I can't keep things straight.
Well, no, that I'm not the only one. who can't keep it straight through it that way. And that's why I was looking back and looking at the description and saying, now, what is this project? I probably heard of it before, but what is it? And the little box with like phrase in it didn't tell me very much. So it was good to have Joby and Mike and yourself, helping us, fill in those blanks. But if you're gonna have an application, I think there could be a little bit more.
We can make a note to next year when we get to the applications, expand that out. And clearly communicate that to the department heads and elected officials and those submitting the applications.
I really appreciate this process, though. It's incredibly helpful.
I think this is just the third year we've done the work session, this work session, or is it just the second? That's the third year we've done this part of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we were just going right to that first meeting of the budget work sessions, and then I think this makes it a little bit more fluid process too. So you can come to those, everyone can come to those work sessions more fully informed.
There is a whole lot of detail that we're all dealing with, and I've personally found the number of work sessions that we've been doing this last few months really helpful. Really helpful, because when it comes to decision making, I think before we did this, I think I remember the first year I was here, I don't think we did. You just kind of don't know what you're dealing with, and you're dealing with it in the context of all the other budget decisions. And it helps to kind of have a step up on this part.
And again, the broken record, this is a planning tool in your toolbox for as you do make the final decisions of it.
Thank you. Anything else yet today?
I want to thank everybody on the group who worked on putting this document together. a lot of good detail and good thought in it.
Need everybody's time to go through it all.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just should adjourn the meeting. Yeah, actually, I'm pulling up the agenda. I accidentally.
Is there anybody who-
You can have public comment on it, but
Didn't have that on there. I mean, if anyone wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, we got one person from the public on there. They want
Like to make public comments, you want to use the raise hand function. We can unmute you. That's what it looks like. Looks like anyone's wanting to make any public comments at this particular time.
doesn't look like it.
Yeah, we could adjourn the meeting.